I will introduce ourselves, but we've gotten together to talk about a topic that I think is important, which is um, as small business owners ourselves, but then also people that work with a lot of people in business. The current climate that's out there is somewhat creating some unknown and very, I call it insecure, vulnerable. I'm sure there's a lot of terms that you use, situations that are out there in the business side. So having a little bit of self-reflection and discussion about how people are feeling and what's going on, I think is healthy. So Laura and I thought we'd get together today, spark a little bit of a conversation around that type of topic, and see where we go from there. So Laura, thanks for joining me. And
Absolutely.
no problem. I appreciate you doing that.
And my name is Laura Gallaher. I am an organizational psychologist. And so what that means is, as a psychologist, I really focus on understanding, explaining, and predicting human behavior. And so the organizational part just means that I do that in the context of companies, organizations, teams. How can we use what we know about the science of human behavior to really help leaders create the kind of cultures they want, cultures that drive productive business, cultures that bring out the best in people, drive engagement, but also just overall improve the quality of their employees' lives.
I was actually one of her clients when I worked at a startup called Unikey in the Orlando area, and actually opened my eyes to a whole world within me that I think I was shut down for many, many years. And it was really about how to bring vulnerability and bring your whole self to the office. And more frankly, it's how do you be yourself with who you are, wherever you are. I think that's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Which ends up being an easier way to be, in my opinion.
It is. It's definitely, but getting there is the anxiety. Once you get there, and once you realize that it's okay to be there, it seems to be a much better place to be. So let's kick this off with, I guess, if you look at the current client that we talked about before, the atmosphere right now coming in a crisis, and then hopefully everyone wanting to get out of it, you can really start to feel pretty down. There's not an end in sight as we see right now. You've got a lot of small businesses, and you wonder what's going to happen, whether you have to let some people go, or even if you're on your own, like I am, and a lot of uncertainty now. So I guess if you were to look at that, whether it's resiliency, adaptability, coping, like I don't know the terms, you do. What is your recommendation
framing is so important, right? And I feel like there are things that I talk about with leaders all the time that it's all still true. It's just sort of true now on steroids, right? So in a quote unquote normal environment or situation, I still think it's in a leader's best interest to look at themselves as somebody who is learning and growing and adapting and figuring things out, right? In my mind, true competence is not about the things that we know. It's actually about a belief that I have the tools to figure that out. I can surround myself with humans who can also help me figure it out. Like, I think that's always true. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It is. It just gets heightened, I think, at this point, right?
Yeah. And that's exactly it. Like it's this on steroids,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and I was just in another conversation earlier today where I had this like half-baked thought where I was like, all the uncertainty that's in the air right now and all the things that we feel aware of, like, wow, I cannot control this. It almost shines a light on the illusion of the things that we think we can control the rest of the time.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that, because I think that there's a false sense of control, I guess. When things are good, you feel like, it's all because of me and my team or whatever it might be, and I'm in full complete. Then when things go like they are currently now, it's like, how do I get that control back?
Right, exactly. And there may be an element of actual loss of control here potentially, but I think that one of the most useful tools right now is to actually think about all the ways in which you already are doing what you need to do, and you've already done this before. So I can speak for myself. Like, I have never experienced a pandemic like this. This is by far the biggest global crisis that I've ever known. I mean, right. I feel like in my lifetime, 9/11 was pretty big. I was in college then. There we go. I just dated myself. But that, and some of the world paid attention to that, but that was still a disproportionate impact on us here in this country. And this is global. So to a large degree, I can look at this and be like, oh my gosh, I have never experienced anything like this before. But the reality is, if I really kind of break it down and I look at, well, so what's happening for me? I'm wanting to make decisions about what's in the best interest of my business. And I feel uncertain. I feel like I'm questioning myself because I don't know exactly what the future holds. But that's kind of always true, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. But it's, I think also a lot of times most people and are privileged enough not to have to also worry about like, am I going to get sick?
Yep.
Like when 9/11 happened, I mean, I lived in DC when it
Mm.
happened. So there was a sense of, and then we had the sniper, and there
Yeah.
was a sense of being out of control there. But it also just seemed like a small percentage where this is like, it just feels like, all right, so I've got the work disruption, the economy side, then which then, trickles down into the home life. And then now, like for me, I've got 2 kids and they're at home too. And they're that whole thing. So I guess it's a sense that nothing feels like it's in control. And
Right.
that maybe that's the difference. Like maybe at work, typically it's not in control, but at least I felt like at home it was under control. Or,
Mm.
my kids are going to school, that's under control. Like,
It's
I
under
don't
somebody
know.
else's control.
Yeah,
They're
somebody else but
dealing with the
mine.
kids now. Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Well, but there's ideas. So there are ideas there that can translate here too. And so, I don't want to seem like I'm oversimplifying and being like, it's just normal. Like keep doing
no,
what
right.
you're doing. That's not what I'm trying to say. But, like part of the conversation that you and I had earlier, it was just, how can I draw from my past experience? When have I been in a situation where I also felt this same emotion? Or when have I been in another situation where I was wanting to make decisions for myself, but I did not have the data and information that I really wanted? When we can like pull on those little examples and those pieces from our own past, that is actually a big part of how we can build up resilience.
No, I get that. That reminds me of something you've told me before, and I think I've read in some other books too. So it tells me that this is an issue for a lot of people, or an opportunity, whichever way you look at it. But is the concept of like going into those emotions instead of trying to
Yeah.
get away from them.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that because like we actually just put out a video earlier this week about 3 ways to stay grounded during COVID-19. And the first way that I said was accept what you're feeling. Like whatever those emotions are, accept them. As soon as you start to shift and you're feeling something and then you're like, well, that's not productive. Like I shouldn't feel that way. And now you're kind of like, you're feeling an emotion about the emotion that you're feeling. It's what, Benjamin Hardy calls a secondary emotion, or Mark Manson calls it the feedback loop from hell, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever emotion I'm experiencing, I want to like fully experience it. I want to allow myself to experience it. So, I described the bell curve that emotions go on. It's useful to just let that play out. And also just recognize that this emotion is information. It's information for me about how I'm feeling. And really, 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 I don't want anybody to shame themselves around the emotions that they feel. So like one of the tools that's really helpful during these times is gratitude. And anytime I talk about practicing gratitude or having perspective, right? And thinking about how life is for other people right now and how some people have it, so much harder than how I have it. My fear is that people are going to hear that and then go into like a shame spiral because they've been freaking out about something that doesn't feel as important. And that's the opposite of what I want. Like, that's why I start with whatever you're feeling, accept that feeling. Like you're saying, lean into it, just acknowledge and accept it. It's human. It's normal. It's like, congratulations, you're part of the human race, right? This is part of our shared humanity. And then being able to shift into being really intentional with focus is huge. So whether that's practicing gratitude, I mean, I could, if I really wanted to, I could list hundreds of things that I'm grateful for right now in this moment. I could choose to journal about that, and it will actually change the chemistry that's happening in my brain. It's going to change what I focus on, and it's going to shift the way that I'm showing up in the world, which is ultimately going to shift what I'm getting out of it. Perspective, right? So in terms of being really intentional with focus, this is temporary. I mean, people are saying like the world is going to change,
Right.
right? We're never going to know the world that we had before COVID-19. It's probably true. And the world as it is right now, this is not going to be forever. Like I can already think about, a year from now or 2 years from now and being like, oh man, do you remember that first quarter of 2020? God, that was so nuts. It was
Mm.
so crazy. Like, had no idea what was going on. I mean, I think for me, like even 2 weeks ago, I was still going out to restaurants and I thought some people were overreacting and I didn't get it. 2 weeks ago, I didn't get it. And now I'm like, oh,
I get it.
yeah. now I get it. And oh my gosh. And there's like no end in sight. So when I'm right in the middle of it, it can feel like this is my entire reality.
So yeah, so I heard a couple things there too. So you mentioned journaling, so that I'm guessing you'd recommend writing that type of stuff, and whether it's
Absolutely.
gratitude or just free flow of what you have in mind, right?
So I would give like 3 or 4 different ways specifically to journal. So like one is like you're saying gratitude journaling. A second thing would be the stream of consciousness journaling, which is you just, you don't stop writing. You actually probably want to time box it, like literally set a timer, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever you have the stamina for, and you write and you don't stop writing. And whatever the thoughts are as they're coming out, you write them, even if you're like, oh, I think I noticed that I'm hungry. Wait, what was I talking about? Like just write all that down. Keep
Right.
writing it down. Really useful way to process through the emotions. A third way to use journaling is in line with what I was just talking about with zooming out and recognizing this is temporary. So choose some point in the future, whether it's 1 year from now, 2 years from now, whatever feels good for you, and write about what's happening in 1 year from now, 2 years from now, as though it is present tense, and even reflect back on what was happening in, March of 2020 and write about how you got through it. You can be
Interesting.
as specific as you can come up with. If you're not totally sure, then you can be more vague. But if you do that, especially every day, you're actually going to start to shape and predict your own future in a way where you do feel like you're more in control of the outcome.
Interesting.
Mm.
I like that. Okay, that's helpful. That's practical tips that almost anybody can do as long as you have a pen and a piece of paper.
Yep.
You can apply that. It does take. I've as someone who has been in your practice, the free flowing journal it's hard when somebody says to you just to write your consciousness of what you want.
Yeah.
There's a vulnerability to that. That you have to get into because it's almost like you have to be honest in a lot of
Yeah,
ways,
it is. It's very honest, but like,
believe it or not.
so I almost never read what I write when I'm doing stream of consciousness. I'm not actually writing to read it later. Other stuff that I journal, I will sometimes go back and read it again, but you're certainly not writing this for anybody else. You're not sharing this with anybody else, and you're probably not even doing it for yourself. Like
That's
you
fair.
could literally write in a Word document and then delete the document. It's about the process. Or you could write pen and paper and then you could, throw it away or burn it if you're feeling really ceremonial or something. I don't know. So you
Right.
don't have to read it, and that can help. It's just the process itself.
It's the process that matters, not the outcome. Again, focused on the outcome, not the process. But in a lot
Yeah.
of this, it sounds like it's the focusing on the process side that is actually where you should spend some time. So whether it's the process of getting comfortable with the anxiety that you may be feeling and work through that, the visualizing the sort of where it's going and that it's okay, the journaling aspect of it. So actually, I just came up with something. I want to see if you're up for it.
Okay.
Totally random.
Yeah.
Real quick, like word association.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'll say a
Okay.
word. You tell me your first thought on it. And
Okay.
they have to do with this topic, so I won't be totally off the wall. But so adaptability.
Resilience.
Okay. See, now you cheat. Resilience.
Experience.
What's interesting to me there though is to you, adaptability has to do with resiliency. Explain that.
It's a piece of it. I mean, it's just the first word that came up.
That's fair. But what do you mean? Like why?
I guess they feel really related to me.
That's
So
fair.
adaptability means like I don't have to keep doing things the way that I've always done them.
Right.
And resilience means that I've experienced a setback and I'm picking myself up and dusting myself off and I'm charging forward. And so I feel like there's a link there. Perhaps resilience wouldn't really work. Like it gets into that idea of the definition of insanity, right? Like if I try
Right.
something and I fail, I get knocked down and I just do the same exact thing, that it's probably not going to work. But I think a piece of adaptability is resilience. I probably need to adapt because I've been knocked down.
That's fair. That's one way to look at it. Because through this, the words that come up continuously just in watching online and reading, and that is both resiliency and adaptability right now seem to be the words of choice,
Mm-hmm.
outside of social distancing and some of the practical things that people need to do with it. But as mentally or, emotionally going through it, those seem to be the two that people bring up the most. So
Yeah.
that's why it's interesting that you relate the two of them that closely to each other, which tells me they probably are.
Yeah. And or I'm saying those same two words and everything.
That could be
So
that too. Yeah, that could be that too. All right. Well, cool. Well, if somebody want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Right now, I think the best way to do that is probably email me directly. It's Laura, which is Laura at GallaherEdge.com. And
so thank you.
nice.
I appreciate making the
And I
time.
like what you have on your board, right? We got this.
I got this.
It sucks right now, but we got this.
Yeah, it's funny. It's come up a handful of times, so I finally wrote it up there, not only for people when they're watching this or doing this with me, but then I see it in the top of my screen as well as a constant reminder. So selfishly, I do it for myself, but then also for others. So it's all good.
Good for you.
All right.
Thanks, Lee.
It's good catching up. Thank you.